live on the poorer side. Unfortunately, I still live at home with my parents. And because of what I did... Oh, hang on. Are we live? I'll tell you later.
Yeah.
Hang on. Your event is ready. Okay, I don't know if we're live yet, so let me just double check. We were live. I live on the poorer side. They've heard it now. Okay. I think we're live. Yes, we're live. Okay, lovely. I'm just getting to know my good friend, good old Augusto Zimmermann. Welcome everyone to my Wednesday night live stream. Today I have Augusto Zimmermann. He has many titles. You have a PhD. You've been educated at Monash University. You are many things. It's like you have such a long resume. I actually don't know where to begin with it. So do you just want to introduce yourself to those who might not be aware of you? And yeah.
All right. We introduce myself then. I was born in Rio de Janeiro a long time ago. And in 2001, I migrated to Australia. And originally to live in Melbourne. And I did my PhD legal studies at Monash University. That was from 2001 to 2006. Then when I finished my PhD, I thought that my mission had been accomplished. And I decided to return to my native country. But I then got an invitation from the then dean of the law school to be there, work with him at Murdoch Law School, Murdoch University, which was not such a terrible law school as it is now. The dean was a nice guy. Then I was appointed Associate Dean for Research. I was appointed Director of Postgraduate Research. Then I ended up becoming a Law Reform Commissioner with the Law Reform Commission of Western Australia. I became the Vice President of the Australian Society of Legal Philosophy, President of the Western Australian Legal Theory Association. Once upon a time, I was the Vice President of the Liberal Party in my division. And I'm the Editor-in-Chief of the Western Australian Jurist Law Journal and the President of the Western Australian Legal Theory Association. And we are setting up a project of a tertiary education provider called Sheridan College.
Such a good idea.
Yeah, it's very important. So we have a Bachelor of Business, Bachelor of Arts, and perhaps in the future we might have a Bachelor of Laws as well.
So I think that's, in case no one, Christian university to make Christian lawyers. Like, how good is that, guys? Like, so that means if I get arrested for something in the future, Augusto Zimmermann has my back.
We have plenty of lawyers to help you.
Thank you. I don't expect to be committing any crimes, but I mean, with the laws changing in Australia as consistently and as stupidly as they are, I might need you.
You might not even necessarily have committed a crime to be in trouble with the law here. Sometimes it's just a comment you might make that can somehow offend a bigot. If the bigot feels offended, then he can use the full force of the law against you.
Yes, because everything is offensive. Like,
about feelings.
It's about feelings. Like a word that's repeated again and again, and while it might not be polite to say, it shouldn't be treated as like a lawful race. Like, well, how dare you call me a Jewish this, or how dare you call me a black that? Like, it's not nice, but you shouldn't be penalized for being a dick.
Well, more than that, the more intolerant you are, the more you feel offended. And the more you feel offended, the more you use these sort of anti-discrimination laws. So these laws are used by the bigots as an instrument of bigotry. Because, of course, if I'm tolerant, I'm not going on suing people. who happen to disagree with me, and even they have a different opinion, and even if they are rude to me and not nice to me, I'm not going on suing people just because they are different. I think that is a sign of the decay of our democratic values in this country, when people feel afraid about expressing their opinions. What kind of democracy is that, where people do not feel comfortable about expressing their opinions in the public square? That's a sign of decay of democracy, of decadence of this country.
Yes. So I think it's important to let everyone know that you come from Brazil and you were originally intending to go home again. I took my microphone out, guys, so let me know if the echo is still there, because you guys are talking about me echoing. But you decided to stay in Australia because you thought you could do more good here. So what have you seen in the last 20 years that you were telling me off camera? What is so bad about Australia in the last 20 years that you felt like maybe your presence would help the situation?
Well, look, of course, when I migrated to Australia 20 years ago, I thought that I was giving a wonderful gift to my family, that here in this country would enjoy uh, full rights and freedoms. And certainly one of the most important freedoms or rights that a human being can have is the right to freedom of speech, for instance. And the most important right is the right to stay alive, so it's the right to life. And now we have in Victoria the government trying to legalize, or has already legalized, assisted suicide. And in New South Wales, they are killing babies now. Because the late-term abortion is total murder of a child. And to have a so-called liberal government endorsing, indirectly endorsing, because they are being a bit deceptive by having an independent introducing the bill, but it's very clear to me that the Premier of New South Wales supports this terrible piece of possible legislation, a bill in Parliament that would legalize the murder of a child.
Yeah.
100,000 abortions are performed every year in this country, which is the killing of innocent human beings.
It is. All right, I'm going to put the microphone. Sorry, I don't mean to keep stopping you, but they said that you're echoing now as well. And
all right.
Sorry, give me a sec. I probably have two screens. Oh, maybe. Maybe I go. But hang on a sec.
No problem.
Sorry. I don't really know what to do to fix the.
But if people can hear, so it's not such a big problem. At least, I mean, the quality might not be the best, but at least we are able to be heard. I don't know. You have to just have a look and see. Let's see.
Yeah, sorry. I'm still learning. I used to use a different. Oh, hang on. Hang on. I don't know what I'm doing. That's very obvious. At least I admit it.
Yeah. Well, I think we should just continue the conversation. Otherwise,
yeah. I just don't like the chat isn't particularly happy with the quality. Right, it doesn't matter. It's all right. Okay, so in the last 20 years, we have seen a growth in the leftist Marxist agenda, right? And that's predominantly because of things like transgenderism and the homosexual agenda. So, what do you think? how is it that in the space of 20 years it went from not spoken about just as much to whoosh, like spoken about so much, and it's now infiltrating its way in our school system? Like, a lot of my friends are having babies, and it's not really something that they're aware of. They have no idea how bad it is. You and I do. Our audience does. Can you explain your theory?
No, I think it's a little bit of a problem indeed, because it causes confusion. It's not just about people thinking that they might be of a certain kind, but it's also to force people to think like that. So I think what's happening with this movement is that it is based on, again, we were talking about feelings, and it's also about feelings, this thing, but it is confusing children. And I find it a little bit complicated when you start to tell kids that they can be whatever they want, or they can decide tomorrow to be girls, but today they can remain as boys or something like that. This is really disturbing, because it really, really confuses the minds of people, and can lead to terrible decisions, because, of course, children are not entirely mature. Even when I was a teenager, I was not mature enough. Now I realize the mistakes I have committed. Because if you start to actually telling children that they can make such decisions, even at the disregard of the parents' intention and will, then you're going to have a tragic reality of children that will one day deeply regret of the decisions they have made. And it will probably be in some instances, on some occasions, it will be too late to reverse the process, especially when it comes to undergoing a surgery, a cosmetic surgery. And that is a very dangerous development. So we have to be extremely careful about these things.
Are you talking about boys becoming girls? Is this the magic surgery you're referring to?
Well, it is an irreversible thing to do.
It is irreversible. I've had a transgendered person on my channel. He's very well known. Have you heard of Walt Heyer?
I know, but if you can tell me who the person is.
Walt Heyer used to dress as a little girl, and his grandmother used to encourage him dressing as a little girl. And then when he grew up and he got married and he had kids, the thought of being a girl wouldn't leave his mind, and he left his wife and children and lived as Laura. And then 8 years living as Laura, he realized that he was misdiagnosed.
Yeah, no, there is another thing I must say.
And it was too late. Sorry, keep going.
No, in many ways, one of the best things in life is to constitute a family. And if you start to have this gender reassignments and things of this nature, can affect your fertility. And it might be that in the future you can't constitute a family with children. And I find it very problematic. I think that one of the greatest things about traditional marriage is this capacity that the child has to be raised by a biological mother and a biological father. I think we should start to talk about the right of the kids, the children, to be having a meaningful relationship with their father and mother. Unfortunately, a homosexual couple can, even though they can have a relationship even legally constituted as a marriage, they can't have a child because it's biologically impossible unless they have to bring a third party to this equation. And then when it happens, you have, rather than two parents, you might have 3 or 4 or even more parents. And it's a violation of the right of a child to not know the biological parent, even because in the future she might contract a disease without knowing that she had the propensity to contract such a disease. For instance, I have a background of people with diabetes in my family, and that's why I try to avoid having too much sugar, even though I love to have a chocolate and even a caipirinha, which is a sugar cane drink coming from my country, native country. But I try as much as I can to be self-disciplined in this regard, because I know that my grandfather died of diabetes. So I have to be careful about it. So all these things, I mean, it's just about adults being selfish, about doing whatever they want, with very little regard for the life and the rights of the child. And, the proof and the evidence that children have no value in this very narcissistic environment that we live is that people, if they are not happy to, after being engaged in a possibly promiscuous relationship, to get rid of the inconvenience of having a child by performing an abortion. Most of the abortions in this country are performed out of convenience. That's because perhaps the couple is not willing to have a bigger car. The back seat sits only 3 children. If they have a 4th children, they have to buy another car. And that would be one of the grounds for people making such a terrible decision of killing their own children.
Do you think the goal in the future is to make women barren? So, to make women not be able to have kids. So the more transgender children there are, the less white people will be born. The less people generally will be born. I think the goal is to mess up family unity, which is husband, wife, children. Do you think the goal is to mess that up so that there's no such thing as a nuclear family anymore?
It's very hard to it's very hard to generalize, because in some cases, even initially, the idea of abortion was part of the eugenics plan of Margaret Sanger in the United States, where she was racist, but she was white racist, and she decided to set up these abortion clinics in the black areas or neighborhoods in the United States. I think there is no doubt that some people have a more sinister agenda, which is connected to their idea, the bogus idea of global warming, and the fact that they perceive human beings as being parasitical to the environment. So a good thing to do for a person, a fanatic like that, is to protect the environment by aborting their own children. So this is one of the things. But this is like the ideologues behind it. It's like the thinkers. They are poor thinkers, and they are actually evil people. But these are a minority in the movement. Most of these people are either useful idiots who think that, they have no idea about what it means to have a baby in the womb. They think that that is not a human being. And they want to deny reality, because now we have X-rays, ultrasound that could prove the existence of the child. But another thing that you have to bear in mind is that it's a culture of narcissistic and selfish behavior. People are having unsafe sexual relations. They contract, as a result, sexually transmitted diseases, and they do not take responsibility for their actions. We live in this reality that you want to have Coke but not caffeine, or you have coffee without caffeine. You want to get the best of the best, but you do not take responsibility for the consequences involved. And that's very much what happens in this situation of abortion. Of course, women become extremely vulnerable when it happens, a legalization of abortion. The legalization of abortion leads to all sorts of pressure placed on women, even by the family of the woman, or by even the boyfriend, or even the family of the boyfriend. So these feminists, it's not only the first instance of violation of human rights by feminists, but in this case they are violating the rights of women, of having the right to keep their babies if they wish to do so.
Yes, I agree with you. I'm going to just ask a question that my friend Margaret sent me. So I think I'll ask it before I forget. Okay, hang on, give me a second. She asked me to ask you. I don't want to. Oh, also, everyone in the chat, it's Margaret's birthday tomorrow, so wish her a happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
She's going to freak out. She's going to love that you said that, because she's a big fan of yours.
Thank you.
So Margaret wants to know, can we stem the flow of Muslim infiltration of the West, and how?
I think it's the main problem is not so much that we have the Muslim situation. I think it's more about the fact that we don't have the right to express opinions in a proper manner. We are not against people. We are against false ideas, and we are against we are against the government trying to stop people from expressing their ideas. And in the Islamic religion, we have the problem of free speech. Even in Islamic countries, if you dare to manifest an opinion that's considered to be blasphemy, the crime to blasphemy is actually death penalty. Of course, they can't apply this sort of penalty in the West, but because we have to cease to use our brains properly, we are trying to protect their sensibilities by telling that they would never have to feel offended in Australia. So what happens is that it ceases to be possible to have a natural discussion about religions in general, and even the causes of religious fanaticism. Of course, that most of these Muslims are not terrorists. It would be stupid to say that every Muslim is a terrorist, because it's not true.
Oh, no, I agree with that. I'm friends with Emma Eros.
But on the other hand, there are many Muslims who are radicals, and they have embraced a radical view of their religion, which would be entirely consistent with the teachings of the Quran and the erratic behavior of the founder of this religion, who practiced terrible things, including genocide. He was a mass murderer under our current standards of crimes against humanity, as proposed even by that dreadful organization called United Nations.
Yes, United Nations is dreadful. But speaking of the United Nations, Margaret did have another question, but I just wanted, that was a good segue. In one of your articles, you actually wrote that Christianity is one of the most persecuted religions in the world, and actually the United Nations itself it describes Christianity in the Middle East as genocide. What is being done is genocide, but nothing is really being done. Why do you think Christianity is so targeted, no one knows about it, or everyone refuses to state this this obvious truth?
I think in many ways it's the fault of the Christians themselves, because they are too cowardly. For instance, we have a prime minister who claims to be a Christian. When I was asking him to do something about Asia Bibi, that Pakistani girl who was condemned to death in Pakistan, death penalty, because she offered a glass of water to two Pakistani women who actually felt offended because as a Christian she would pollute the glass of water. And then she was condemned to death and accused of the crime of blasphemy just because she dared to say that our religion is superior to their religion, which is quite obvious to me. And that was considered to be good enough for her to be sent to jail and condemned to death. But then I approached the government. I actually was on Sky News, on a program called Outsiders with Rowan Dean.
Oh yes, I know the show.
Begging this government to do something. I was appalled by the fact that Scott Morrison was entirely silent on the subject. And initially they had refused to do anything. Then they came up with this very strange idea that if nobody else helped her, they could consider the possibility of helping her. If it's a human rights issue, it's a humanitarian issue, why do you have to wait for others to do the right thing? If you receive all these refugees, and some of them clearly are economic migrants, when you have a very clear clear-cut case of a person being oppressed, I just don't understand what the government had to wait for. Scott Morrison is a very confused man when it comes to religious freedom, because he interprets religious freedom from a blasphemy perspective that nobody can feel offended by the comments made about their religion. That's not the Christian approach. I'm not afraid of having a robust discussion with non-Christians. That's more akin to the views of the Muslim community, where they have learned that nobody can criticize their prophet and so forth. And when he talks about religious freedom, he talks about all religions being good and wonderful. I don't think Satanism is a good religion. I don't think radical Islam is a good religion. And I think there are some religions that are pretty dreadful. And I deserve my right in a democracy to criticize these religions because they deserve to be criticized.
I think that it's offensive to say this, but I believe that Christianity is the most superior faith. But people don't like that statement. I think it's true.
Well, that's the religion that gave the enemies, if I can say, of the cross, to attack us and to criticize us, because the idea is that in Christianity, even if in some periods of time the church has committed a mistake, but they were not consistent to the teachings of the prophet, the founder of the religion. Jesus was I don't like the word pacifist, but he was a peacemaker.
Yes.
And was a person who told, that we can't force people to believe in him. And he treated the worst kind of people in the eyes of the Pharisees, the religious people of the day, with utmost respect and honor.
Yes.
Including prostitutes, alcoholic people like drunkards. He was actually accused of being one and not being religious enough. One of the reasons as to why he was crucified is because he was not so religious as the other people. He decided to heal the sick and the blind on a Saturday. He didn't wash the cup in a proper manner. So that offended the religious people of the day. So Christianity is the least religion of all religions.
Yes, well, I would agree with you. But supremacy is bad. White supremacy, Jewish supremacy, black supremacy, it's all evil. Christian supremacy, I'm okay with.
No, there's another thing as well. Bear in mind the fact that in Christianity we are told that we are sinful people. Everybody in a certain sense, even if they're well-intentioned, they can get easily corrupted by power. So the whole idea of separation of powers, the whole idea of the existence of government is because we were endowed by God with inalienable rights to life, liberty, and property.
Exactly.
And that's then telling us that these rights are not given by the state. If the state gives and the state takes away, blessed be the name of the state. But that's not what Christians believe, that since these rights are not state-given, the role of the government is to protect these rights and freedoms. And if it attempts against the rights and freedoms, it ceases to have proper legitimacy.
That's fair. Another question is, what do you think about welfare payments going to multiple wives of one man and their children? Is it part of Sharia law to pay for all a man's? Yeah.
I think it's because we are stupid. I mean, it's really an obvious case of a person who is milking the system. When I was at Monash University, I saw some pregnant teenagers being together with old practices of this particular religion. And the point is that in Islam, for instance, there is something called honor killing. So a person who dishonors the family will be dealt accordingly, if I can put it like that. So this whole idea about having these pregnant teenagers, being single mothers, I don't buy these. I think what happens is that some Muslims are actually having unofficially 2, 3, and 4 wives. And it's not my allegation because it's actually reported by the media then. It's actually proven. I think a person who is trying to do such a thing is in gross violation of the laws of the land and should be punished accordingly. Not only sent to jail, because in my opinion that's not even good enough. He should have to pay back everything he has stolen from the taxpayers. In many ways, there should be a law saying that he will have to be in jail until he pays his bill. He would have to return every single cent that he has stolen from the people of this country.
Yes. Okay, now I'm going to ask you the questions that I wrote down. I just wanted to start off with those questions before I forgot them. So, do you oppose the term Judeo-Christian? Because a lot of people don't like the term Judeo-Christian. One, because they reject the Jewish element, and also because Judeo-Christian is a term that's only been used in the last, I don't know, I think 50 years. So yeah, that's my first question. Do you oppose the term, or do you like the term Judeo-Christian? And if so, why?
I don't think it's a necessary term. I think we should use just Christian. And in many ways, a good Christian should appreciate both the Old and the New Testaments. We have to bear in mind that Jesus didn't come to get rid of the law. He was very clear in his message that he came to fulfill the law. So when we say Christianity, we're talking about a progression in the revelation of the truth. The God of the Old Testament noticed that it's not possible to get human beings trying to deliver the message of salvation, and even for people to be fully redeemed. He would have to come on earth in human form in order to do this act of salvation. So in many ways, the beautiful thing about Christianity is that God loves us so much that he came on earth in order to develop this relationship with us and set us free. And that is an amazing thing. And Jesus, humanly speaking, he was born as a Jew. And I actually love the fact that that's what I talk to my Jewish friends, that Jesus was a liberal Jew. Because he told these guys that, we have to have compassion. And the meaning of the law is to exercise love and compassion. And that's what it means to be a Christian.
I love that. I've never heard that. Jesus was a liberal Jew. That's very smart, because he went against the traditions of the time.
Yeah.
And they didn't like what he was saying. That's why he turned the table over. Oh, no, that's a different reason. But, you're very right. That's good. I like that. We should do a Bible study together.
God is liberal also in the sense that he gave us 10 commandments only. I wished all the laws in all countries had only 10 precepts. And they are quite reasonable. We shall not murder. I think it's quite reasonable. We shall not commit adultery. It's absolutely reasonable. Unfortunately, in this country, adultery is rewarded rather than punished because of the existing laws. But they are only 10. And then Jesus said, look, you don't even have to worry so much about that. How about loving your neighbor as you love yourself? And then all these will be fulfilled naturally. So he reduced to 2 then.
Most difficult
love God above all things, and love your neighbor as you love yourself, and all these laws will be fulfilled.
The most difficult thing that is humanly possible is to love someone who has hurt you, whether it be personal, whether it be your enemies, whether it be your neighbor. The most difficult thing is to love someone as much as you love yourself. That is very hard to fulfill, and I try every day, and I fail every day.
You can have righteous indignation, and you can love a person by not telling the person what she or he wants to hear, if you think that this is going to compromise his or her life and ultimately his or her salvation. I think tolerance is actually an act of lack of love sometimes.
I agree.
When you actually are indifferent to the causes of suffering and bad decisions. I'm not going to tolerate my child using drugs. I'm not going to tolerate my child putting her little finger in the oven because it's going to burn her little hand. So a couple of things. People who tend to be tolerant about things they are unconcerned about. when you get the left concerned about something, they tend to be the most intolerant sort of people have ever come across. What we have to understand is that the meaning of tolerance has been corrupted and distorted. I'm talking about real tolerance and not fake tolerance. Fake tolerance is what the left promotes, which is basically quite intolerant because it tells me that I'm obliged or forced to agree with their opinions. When it happens, these people actually distorting and inverting the real meaning of tolerance by telling me that I have no right to think different.
Well, I can give you a very quick example of the left. We need tolerance. We need tolerance. We want love. FUCK Trump. That's literally what they do. That's exactly what the left is all about.
Yes.
They're a walking contradiction.
Indeed, and that's a very terrible thing for democracy because we need to have an environment of real tolerance.
Yes.
And that is when you have the right to be engaged with respect in a robust discussion about any matter whatsoever, feeling comfortable that we are not going to face the full force of the law by just expressing opinions. In a democracy, the best debate should always prevail, the best argument should always prevail, but it can only happen after robust debate and deliberation.
Yes, I agree. I was going to ask you this, so I'm jumping from topic to topic, but we just mentioned the Catholic. I was wondering if you would mind talking a little bit about how you left the Catholic Church and how you became a born-again Christian, because I think testimonies are very lovely. So how did you're obviously Brazilian, so like me, you're Latin American, although you're obviously German blood, but like me, you come from Latin America originally. So could you talk about how you came out of the Catholic religion into Christianity? Because I love those stories. They're just very nice.
All right. Now, look, I have many Catholic friends. I love them.
Oh, of course. I don't hate Catholic people.
Some people even think that I'm still Catholic because I have embraced some of the principles developed by the Catholic Church. One of these principles, which is quite connected with my Presbyterian positions, it's actually the principle of subsidiarity. It's a really hard word to say. It's subsidiarity, but it is quite simple to understand. It means that you should never give to a higher level of power what a lower level of power can do likewise, or perhaps even in a better way, which means that we should empower the individual. We should never give to this family even what the individual can do. We're certainly never giving to the state what the family can do by itself. So we should never ask a more distant level of power what a more closer level of power can do for you. And of course, we should not even delegate your own power if you have the capacity to do things by yourself. So I wrote a book about that. I even edited the book on the Catholic principle of subsidiarity. Is certainly very good, a very good principle. It can be connected with the principle of sphere of sovereignty, which is a Calvinistic principle that I fully and wholeheartedly embrace. So in many ways, my father was really absolutely horrified when I ceased to be a Catholic. But I'm very ecumenical in the sense that I have come across with Catholics who are not into idolatry. They are not into Mariolatry, but they are quite Christ-centered. These sort of Catholics are closer to me in the pursuit of the truth than many liberal Protestants from denominations such as the Uniting Church, which is a pagan church now, and even some segments of the Anglican Church, including in Perth, where the Archbishop endorses all sorts of things that, too, into the eyes of God, could easily be called an abomination. So I'm not into denominations so much anymore.
Neither am I.
I'm really seeking the real thing. I try to be just Bible based, and I believe that the more I read the Bible, the more I'm convinced that the Lord is a Lord, a God of freedom, and a God gave us so much love and so many rights.
Yes.
So I love Him each day more, and there's no problem for me to be engaged in a discussion because it's an honor and a privilege to be serving Him as ambassador.
I agree. Often I'm asked, what kind of Christian are you? And I never have an answer. I'm just like, I'm non-denominational. Like, I don't really know. Like, it's just, let's just focus on the Bible and all the rituals. All the rituals the Catholic Church does or the Orthodox Church does. All of the rituals don't matter to God. It's irrelevant. It's not biblical anyway.
Yes, I couldn't agree more.
Yes. Okay. So something that you wrote that I found quite interesting was that Australia derived from the Christian worldview, and which was inherited through the English common law. But many people argue today that that's not the case, and that in fact Australia has always been secular. How would you rebuttal that statement? Because you've obviously written a whole entire paper on it.
Not only that, I have books. I'll just bring the copies here. Just one that is here. Just 1 second.
Okay. Awesome. I'm very sorry, everyone, about the echo. I need my friend from the United States because he's the only one who knows how to use OBS to help me.
Well, look, I decided to rebut this argument by writing a book. But then I found out that there's so much to say about that it became a collection of 3 volumes.
Oh, wow.
The first one is this one, Christian Foundations of the Common Law. I had to spend, 300 pages or so to talk about England. So that's Christian Foundations of the Common Law, Volume 1, England. Then I moved on to Christian Foundations of our Legal System and our Constitutional Law. I had to write about the United States.
Oh, cool.
That's volume 2. And then finally, we have the 3rd volume that is about us here in Australia. It's called The Christian Foundations of the Common Law, Volume 3 on Australia. So look, it was not a very pleasant experience in many ways. I'll tell you why. Because there is so much to say that it is overwhelming. So for a person to say that we don't have a Christian foundation, the person is being completely crazy.
It's atheists. It's atheists and leftists.
Alternatively, it's a very idiotic statement. It's a very stupid statement. The whole common law is based on Christianity.
Yes.
Every single principle of a legal system, traditionally speaking, came directly from the Bible. And even the most prominent common lawyers, the likes of Edward Cook, John Fortescue, Blackstone, they were actually almost like priests to our standards, current standards. They would actually appeal directly to Scripture, even in their judicial rulings. So it was almost impossible to see a legal decision in England up to the 19th century even, without passages from the Scripture, even to the point that England still doesn't have a written constitution, because even jurists of the 20th century would say that it's because of Scripture, that they believe that we have what is called the law of reason, and the whole tradition of natural law, implying then in their belief that we are endowed by God with rights. That is coming from the natural law tradition in the West. And this whole thing is what justified the idea of limited government, of separation of powers, and of individual rights and freedoms. If we remove this foundation, then the edifice of constitutionalism in the West might well collapse. It's because we don't have the proper foundations. So we have to preserve this tradition in order to have a plausible argument in defense of these fundamental rights. Otherwise, we can't have a proper argument if we don't have a proper philosophical underpinning.
Yes, that's very true. Well, I think, by the way, really friend would send me those 3 books. I'm only kidding.
We can talk about this later.
I'm so sorry. That was so rude. All right.
It's not expensive, by the way. It's you can find this on the website of Concord, which is the publishing houses. I think it's only $30 per
I
copy.
was joking. It's okay. I did want to say that something that you wrote that I found interesting, which is something that we actually stand against, right? So we as right-wing conservatives, so I don't know if you consider yourself right-wing, I'm certainly more right than I am left.
I like it.
Yes, exactly. But as a person who is more on the right than on the left, I'm never going to say where on the right I am because I don't know because
Yeah.
the pendulum keeps moving. I do believe that the left is justified, let's say, in complaining about having religion taught in schools. Okay, so by that justification, then should be equal, and their ideology of transgenderism.
On YouTube. What's up to it?
Sorry. So
I'm staying. I'm staying. All right. I'm staying.
it's okay. Ish.
All right. Solved.
It's okay. No worries. No worries. Okay. So by that justification, where the left thinks it's not appropriate to have religion taught in schools, well then I as a Christian would then say, well then they have to do the very same thing and not teach our children about sex and masturbation and transgenderism and homosexuality. And none of that should be taught either. So no ideology should be taught in school. We should just be teaching maths, history, English, just the basics. But in your paper, you have written that compulsory church services, that we should educate children in the schools that were established, and that William Holdsworth said Christianity is part and parcel of the common law of England and therefore is to be protected by it. Now, whatever strikes at the very root of Christianity tends manifestly to dissolution of civil government. So, do you
Government.
think? Yeah, so do you think that Christianity should be taught in all schools, or do you think we should just be teaching the basics? What are your thoughts? Hello? I'm gonna have to call back. Alright, I'm just gonna have to recall him. Sorry guys, poor connection. So I'm gonna have to try I know my audio's getting worse. I'm fiddling with the mixer, that's why. I should just stop fiddling with it. I'm just gonna call him back and see. Wow. How unprofessional is this live stream? Hang on. Hello?
I don't know what happened,
I
but
don't know either. It's so weird, but I don't know what to do now. I don't know if we are still live because we've had to call each other back. Hang on. Let me check my OBS. I don't know if we're back. I can't really tell. Hang on. Let me just refresh the screen.
that.
Sorry. I don't know if we're back in the live.
I think it was a spiritual attack.
I don't know. It's really weird.
It's a spiritual attack. We were actually praising God and
Yeah, it must
talking
be.
about Islam, and
Maybe it's
there
easier.
are some spiritual strongholds on these issues.
Yes.
So
Okay.
we might have angered the opposition.
Maybe. I think the government's watching me. Tomorrow I'll be dead.
Well, look at Some strange things can happen after you start to do this sort of work.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. Okay, okay, good. I just got $10 from Biba Anti-Bullying. What the
Temper.
hell, Elijah? What are you doing? Why are you deleting that message? What is wrong with you, Elijah? You're getting too trigger happy. You're not doing your job properly. Someone just gave me $10 and he deleted the post. Anyway, okay. So you have an answer to my question regarding what you think about religion being taught in schools. Should Christianity be taught in schools?
I think it's important to talk about naturally about religion in history. The history curriculum, for instance, should be addressing Christianity as a natural thing. That's because the West is based on particular Christian tradition, and the reason as to why the West is so Christian and not countries in the Middle East, for instance, is because the Christians were invaded and conquered by Muslim hordes, and especially after Muhammad started to expand the Islamic faith. And it was not expanded by peaceful means, it was by violent means. So that countries such as Persia and Egypt, where the majority of the population were Christian, were basically decimated and eliminated. Now we have the original inhabitants of these countries comprising only about 10% of the population, because they were under a terrible tyrannical regime that basically endorsed a genocidal policy. And in the West, we have a Christian tradition, and this tradition had an impact on our legal system, had an impact on our values, and made us the envy of the world. But the only reason that the only way we can actually understand the roots, the causes of our advantage in so many areas, including technology, including medicine, and so forth, is because of this Christian heritage. Because the leading scientists in the West, I'm talking about people who initiated the scientific revolution, they were in many ways not just scientists. They were actually trying to honor God by doing science, because they believed that this would lead to the discovery of laws of nature as conceived by God, because the God of Christianity is not arbitrary, it's not tyrannical. So what these people try to do is to honor God by discovering the laws of nature. And the more they did science, the more they were entirely assured that this would be akin to an act of worship. In many ways, even in my own job as a lawyer and a legal academic, I do my job, and I believe that I do properly and efficiently because I want to honor God, because I want to excel. And as a Christian, I want to show that my philosophical positions lead to a better outcome than any other competing ideology.
Well, I think when society was purely Christian, and this isn't to talk against any other faith or religion, but when Australia was just a normal Christian country and didn't have this, what I'm about to say goes against yourself and goes against me, technically speaking, because we are immigrants. Well, I'm the daughter of immigrants, you are an immigrant. But when Australia started adopting immigration at the capacity that it's adopted it, we started introducing foreign concepts and foreign ideologies, and multiculturalism sort of has, maybe one could argue, destroyed the Christian foundation of Australia.
Yeah, but bear in mind that these ideas, including multiculturalism, were not created by migrants. The migrants have been used by the political and intellectual elites in Australia as a scapegoat for the imposition of their moral relativism and
Sure.
postmodern ideas. So I think it's a little bit complicated when you say, for instance, like when you argue that the fact that you have these people coming to this country, that would cause the problem. I think the problem is when you don't select the people properly, when
Okay,
you
I
don't
can
not
accept
bring
that.
the people who uphold better values than even people who were born here. In
Sure.
many ways, I am more Australian than most of the Australians
Well,
because
you're Aryan. You're
because I
German.
was very wealthy in my country. My family, I came from a very good background.
Yes.
And the only reason I came to this country is because I believed that this was a Western country
Mm.
where I would be able to live in a country where people are equal before
Sure.
the law,
Yes.
and I would be respected in my rights and freedoms. So I feel offended. I feel literally offended when these political and academic elites in the West are using foreigners for the purpose of destroying our heritage in this country, our rights and freedoms, because the good migrants came to this country for the purpose of enjoying the things that the elites in this country are trying to destroy. And by doing so, they are betraying the Australian people, and they are using foreigners as an excuse to advance their morally relativistic agenda that
Yeah.
is totally incompatible with their traditions and principles that we have inherited from the ancestors who lived in this on this land.
I can accept what you're saying, that it's you don't like the foreigners being blamed, but I don't. I think a lot of people are pretty based, and they know that it's actually the Marxist globalist agenda and that it's the left permitting it. I don't think anyone actually blames, the specific Muslims that are doing what they're doing. They're doing what they do because that's what they know. That's how they've been raised. So the country of Australia should definitely be choosing its immigrants better. But I suppose the point
Well,
of
the nation is the extension of a family. I do not open the doors to anybody to enter in my house. At
exactly.
the same time, I have children who I'm very concerned about their future. And I
Yes.
want them to live in a country where women are respected,
Mm.
where people have the right to express different opinions, and where the rule of law, including principles of natural justice and due process of law, are exercising its power so that
Mm.
we don't have innocent people paying the price and
Mhm.
being unfairly treated, or even perhaps going to jail for unreasonable reasons, unreasonable grounds, better saying. So
Sure.
what's happening in this country is that it's no longer safe to live in Australia. If
No.
I were thinking about being free, I would not be living here. I actually prefer the state of nature existing in South America than even the oppressive hand of the state in Australia. Because the laws, when they are used for the purposes of oppression, it's better to be with a small and weak government than to have a powerful government being using its law for the purposes of oppressing the innocent.
That's a
And
solid
that's
point.
what's happening in Australia, especially in this area that I mentioned of family law. When, as a commissioner, I saw many people losing property rights and access to their kids on the
Yeah.
basis of false accusations, on the basis of spurious grounds, and even incentive to parental alienation coming from child support payments, where if the person happens to alienate the children from the other parent, he or she will receive financial rewards for that in the form of child support payments. And also people who have lost property rights
Mm.
because the state goes on confiscating property. Another thing is that if I work like a dog, as I do, really work hard, I find it unbearable to have to give 40% of my salary in income tax. We say that we have a liberal, free society, but in no free society, we pay so much tax and we are so much exploited by the state, such as we are in this country. I'm not here to have pleasure. I think I was called by God to tell the truth. If I want to
Yes.
have a pleasant life, if I want to have a nice life, I wouldn't be living in Australia now, but I'm here because I love the people of this country, and I do not appreciate the way the elites treat the people in this country. We have to fight against the elites because they are only aiming their own interests. They are not keen on protecting the people of this country. They actually despise the people of this country. They call them racists and all sorts of names. I find it unbelievable that you keep voting for people who despise us so much.
I vote for smaller parties.
A nation perish for the lack of knowledge. And that's a very important thing, that we have to start voting better and potentially to replace at least 9% of our uncompassionate, because they lack compassion, and heartless political elites in this country.
My friend Dean McRae is very much, in terms of money and finances, very much a libertarian regarding the 40%. The 40% you said. So, are you a little bit libertarian regarding your stance politically?
Well, I think I have a libertarianism out of fear, because any clever and intelligent person knows that the main instrument of oppression in the history of humanity is actually big government.
Yes, I would agree.
The government that's big enough to help you will be certainly big enough to destroy you. So why on earth you're giving so much power to the state? It tells me that if the person thinks like that this person is not with his mind operating according to a biblical approach. Because the Bible tells us about sinful nature and the fact that power corrupts. And of course, Lord Acton added by saying, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So what we need is actually to limit the power of the state, so that we have the possibility to have a life of liberty.
How do we do that? Like, what should we, like, if we wanted to give the government 10% of our funds instead of 40% of our funds, or however, how would we do that? Like, do you have a policy prescription that could deter this, or that could resolve this?
I think there's no doubt that the growth of the welfare state, the growth of state aid, is directly proportional to the crisis where the present crisis in the West. And that's because people lack compassion. People lack compassion. People lack solidarity when they expect the state to do everything for them. So we now have families utterly dysfunctional in this country, and fathers leaving the wives leaving their husbands, parents leaving their children, and vice versa, because they expect the state to step in. And every time the state rewards misbehavior, guess what happens? We have more misbehavior. We have more erratic behavior.
They removed welfare programs, all of them.
Well,
money back in our pockets.
I would be able to do more charity if I didn't have to give all this money to the government.
That's true.
And certainly in the past, people would do that naturally. And it's certainly not what we should do, because the state cannot understand what lies behind every dysfunctional behavior. Bureaucrats cannot understand the spiritual causes of the problem, and even the reason as to why the person is in such a terrible state. Only the people who are close to you are able to know the problems that you have and how it can be fixed. So what the state can do is to reward dysfunctional behavior.
Yes.
By perhaps giving money to people who shouldn't receive them, because they'll spend this with alcohol and drugs, for instance.
Yes.
That's actually a very terrible thing, because it's actually evil and unjust, even to the recipient of the so-called assistance. The main benefactors of the welfare state are the bureaucrats, who are never going to solve the problem, because otherwise they would lose their jobs. So the bureaucrats, once the problem exists, they will never solve the problem, because otherwise they would not have their jobs. They will have to keep their jobs by feeding the diseases and the problems that society faces.
Someone in the chats, again, Dean, has written a very good point, and something that I was actually going to mention to you. When Julia Gillard was in government, she removed perjury from law, so like in family law. So when men try to have their rights, and mothers can just say, oh, he's abusing me, and it could be a complete lie, and you're not allowed to use the grounds of perjury. So men basically have no rights in acquiring back their own children, because women are so evil and vindictive that they don't give a shit. They just want to sorry, I didn't mean to swear. You know what I mean? What are your thoughts on, is when you say that Australia is in a huge moral decline, do you also include rights that men have? Because children belong to the state now, almost.
Well, some women are married with the state.
Yes.
But the point is that this is not just a problem affecting men, because the children, some of them are girls who are alienated from the fathers.
Yeah.
Certainly as a result of the writing of these laws, because these laws were really designed by radical feminists, but they wouldn't be so blunt to put there that the purpose is to help women or to destroy marriage or oppress men or whatever. It's written in a gender neutral fashion. And some women became the victims now, because, of course, since custody normally goes to the mother, custody of children. But I was just checking my time, but I still have about 10 minutes more.
We can. Are you designated to an hour? Do you have to be somewhere?
Yes, I have to leave in about 15 minutes. Is that right?
Yeah, that's fine. Sometimes we go over, that's all. Sorry, keep going.
All right. So I think I have 15 minutes more, and I need to go. But I'll explain this.
Sure.
Because we have this problem of false accusations, all the things that are happening, I know that, because after all, I am a member of the legal profession, and I was a law reform commissioner. Some people with malicious intentions make false accusations. There's no doubt about that. But men normally do not obtain custody of children.
No, unfortunately.
What happens is that the best way for a man to obtain the custody of children is to make an accusation of domestic violence against the mother. And I have seen women who have lost everything. They cannot, because they have been falsely accused. That's why the problem is actually no longer restricted to men. But in saying so, this is the final step, because initially only men were the victims. 99% of them were male victims.
Yes.
And that's because the woman can make accusations of financial abuse and emotional abuse. The meaning of domestic violence has been extended to such a manner that you can actually make all sorts of accusations, and that can be considered an instance of domestic violence, such as if the husband doesn't share a bank account with you, or if someone said something you didn't like or something like that. That would be verbal abuse.
Yeah.
It could be emotional. You name it. All sorts of things can go in the situation. And then of course the person goes to the police, makes a false accusation, and the person receives interim order. An interim order can be very easily issued. But when it happens, the person who is the recipient of this order is prevented from returning home, and he's prevented even to be in touch with his children if the person who applied has has the guard of the kids with them.
Yes.
So it's not it's a major problem that's happening, and it's something that the authorities already know about. Our politicians have been informed about this problem, but it seems that there is no willingness.
Hope is in Ricardo Bossi. Ricardo Bossi is the future of Australian politics. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah. Well, look, it's very terrible to know that it's not lack of knowledge of the issue. These politicians actually know that some lives are being destroyed, that this is the leading cause of suicide in this country, that we have so many men taking their lives as a result of this. Can imagine a person who not only is unable to see the kids, but he lost his right to return home, and he has to be rewarding, giving perhaps 50%, 60% of his salary to the person who has caused such a terrible thing, an evil. Not only he's not seeing his kids, but he's condemned to a life of deprivation and poverty. So that's one of the leading causes of suicide in this country.
It is.
We see a no way out. Some will go overseas, move elsewhere. Others are going to give up. And it's also the leading cause of domestic violence, one of the leading causes of real domestic violence, when you're falsely accused of domestic violence. I actually have written about the fact that false accusations of domestic violence leading to the loss of custody and leading to the loss of property can be a factor aggravating domestic violence that can actually lead to real domestic violence when you are falsely accused of committing such a thing.
No, that's true. I read an article by Bettina Arndt, and she said exactly what you just said, that men are dying based on the fact that they don't get to see their kids, and they commit suicide, and no one gives a crap about men. It's ridiculous, particularly white, straight Christian males. It's just sad. But I think your time is up because you need to go.
No, that's another thing that I must say.
Oh, sure.
There is even this academic at UWA. She's the head of the Center for Islamic State. Could be, but then you have this terrorist group that has already is already using the name. So it's called Muslim States and Societies. And she claims that the problem with Muslim domestic violence is that we are the cause, that they don't feel comfortable here. So they bash up their wives as a result because they feel uncomfortable to live in Australia. It's really transferring the responsibility to white people for the crimes that they themselves commit.
That's retarded.
And that's ridiculous, and it's really retarded. I agree with you. The argument is so appallingly stupid.
It is.
And she happens to be a professor even. So you can go to Quadrant online.
Most professors are stupid these days.
Quadrant online, and you can read my comments about this utterly stupid statement. But she's highly respected, and the liberals consult her about policies and things like that. She says, for instance, that Australia is so good because, and the rights we enjoy here, it's all because of multiculturalism.
Oh, dear God.
And of course, it's such a ridiculous thing to say, because multiculturalism doesn't mean what kind of cultures we have. For instance, I'll tell you, I actually like a multicultural society comprised of Protestants, Catholics, and you can even have Jews, and that would be a very interesting society.
Oh, sure.
But if you have a multicultural society comprised of radical Muslims, cannibals, and Nazis, I think I want to be there. So basically, or communists for that matter. So basically, this whole idea about multiculturalism it's actually the leading cause of civil war, the leading cause of secession and fragmentation, destruction of societies. Ronald Dahl, he is a professor at the University of California in Berkeley. He wrote a book on democracy. And he says that one of the main causes, or primary causes of civil war, death, and destruction is cultural diversity. And it's written in the book called On Democracy, because some cultures do not adapt very well with others. Some of these cultures might have supremacist inclinations.
Yes.
And when they are coming to a society such as ours, they have no intention whatsoever to embrace the values of our society,
Exactly.
women's rights including, or the rule of law, or individual rights and freedoms. They are coming to control and dominate, and they have a sense of superiority that makes it impossible for them to coexist harmonically with other cultures.
Yes.
And as you see in many countries, too much cultural diversity leads to the undermining of fundamental rights and basic things that lead to a more harmonious society, including the fact that you have to actually speak the common language in order to discuss in a democracy.
Absolutely.
So you need to have the same language, you have the same similar values. But if you don't have these things in a society, then it might lead to all sorts of unintended consequences.
I think I was watching Red Ice TV not too long ago, and they made a point. I think I agree with you, but I think I would use a different term, because I think you're saying multiculturalism is fine, but I would say that multiracialism is more where I lean. Multiracialism means a society where, or I probably don't even need to explain it to you, but anyway, I'm more for multiracialism than multiculturalism, because multiculturalism to me means that all these other cultures try to merge into the existing host country that already exists. I don't like that. I would rather, like, you and I have entered this country. I mean, I was born here, but like my mother has entered this country and you have entered this country and pretty much assimilated, and not tried to say, well, I deserve to have midday to 3 o'clock to be able to wear my bikini. There are swimming pools in Brunswick, which is very much, or Coburg, very much an Islamic area here in Melbourne, where the swimming pools allow the women to swim at a certain time of day.
Well, look,
you know what I mean? That's multiculturalism gone wrong. That's not right.
Multiculturalism has always been wrong, because it was when I said about multiculturalism, it's morally relativistic.
Okay.
Because it's based on the idea that all cultures equally valid, that every culture has an intrinsically speaking, a positive value, and that's actually not right at all. So multiculturalism is a postmodern idea and it's intrinsically connected with the deconstruction of Western civilization. It was created in the 1960s by radicals with the intention of deconstruct the values of Western societies. So multiculturalism has never been about real integration whatsoever, or the so-called melting pot, but it is a plot of the radical left to deconstruct the values of Western societies.
Yes.
It's quite clear to me. And I have written many articles about the trouble with multiculturalism, and I think it is indeed a very dreadful idea.
Okay, because you said earlier that Jews and Christians and I thought you were saying that you were for it, which is you're allowed to be for it, but that's what I thought you were saying.
I was trying to be ironic because
sorry.
There are different cultures. You have religious manifestations, and if I were to live in a society where there are a couple of Catholics around, I'm a Protestant, this would be different religious manifestations. So that's what I was trying to say.
Sorry.
But multiculturalism is to undermine your own culture. That's why people feel so depressed in Australia. I feel sorry for the people of this country because they cease to have a culture. Once you have
Yes.
multiculturalism, then you don't have your own culture anymore.
Exactly. I agree.
And
Yeah.
no wonder that these people reverse to their original culture, and they become so antagonistic to us and to the Australian culture or the Australian society.
Mhm.
That's because they are taught to celebrate difference, and they are taught to never feel integrated. It's a very terrible thing that makes them more radical. So as a result, the second generation of immigrants tend, I'm not saying about you, but they
No.
tend to be more
It's
radical.
okay.
They tend to be more radical than their forefathers. Your mother came from a Catholic country.
She did, but
Uh,
she rejects her
yeah,
Catholic roots. She's a born
yeah,
again Christian.
but it has a Christian sort of flavor.
Mhm.
It's not the same as if you had been born in Afghanistan. I think what we have in this country is the right to choose our immigrants. And it
Mhm.
wouldn't be a bad thing to have more Christians coming to this country because some of immigrants coming from Christian backgrounds, they actually are more aware of the Islamic problems and the issues than the naive Australian elite that are ruling this country.
Mm.
And they have utter disregard for our values and traditions that we ourselves, coming from other places that have seen more of reality of what happens in the world, are not so naive. We know how much it's important to protect what led to the greatness of this amazing country.
Yes, I agree.
A phone call, but not here, and then another person is coming now to pick me.
Okay.
So
No worries. Well,
uh,
then, thank you
it's
so
been
much for
such a
coming
pleasure.
on.
No, we can talk another day again.
Yes, we have to because honestly, we only got so far, and like you're the kind of person that I just want to like crack your head open and get more out of the brain and try and like get as much as I possibly can. I can see why everyone was excited that you were coming on my channel. I definitely don't deserve to be interviewing you or to be interviewing half the people I get to interview.
It's a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so
Keep up the
much.
good work.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice of you. So guys, if you want to see his works, just write Augusto Zimmermann, and you'll see everything he's about and all of his articles. They're actually pretty fantastic. Be sure to buy his trilogy of books on common law in Australia. I feel like that's the next thing I want to buy in my collection. Thank you so much for everything. And guys, I have a special live stream this Sunday. This Sunday, my special live stream will be my friend Joel Jamal. He was recently interviewed by Tim of The Unshackled, but I'm going to delve further into that particular subject matter this Sunday. And please come back on my channel one day. Maybe one day we'll meet face to face, and then I can like sit in one of your lectures or something. That would be so incredible.
It will be a pleasure, and I hope to keep in touch with you. Then let's continue this conversation on another day. But
Well,
thank you so much for the chance.
no, that's okay. I'll probably get banned on Facebook eventually, so maybe message me your number, and then I'll annoy you. I'll annoy you all the time.
That will be because you're doing the right thing then.
I'm doing all the right things.
Next to censor the right people.
I'm hated by all the right people.
I know. That tells
Like
me
you.
that you are probably doing something really quite right then.
Thank you. The biggest compliment is that, oh, you're hated by the right people. Thank you.
Yeah, to be rated by the wrong people is also something you could put in your curriculum.
Yes.
If you don't have people who oppose you, it's because you're not being salt and light, and your work is basically worth of nothing. The fact that you have opposition is because you are making a difference. And look, if people don't agree with you, they have no right to go after you in such a manner. If they really value tolerance, they would allow you to have a say and to speak out on any issue whatsoever.
Well, the live is doing something strange. You've disappeared. I don't know
All
what's
right,
happening.
so perhaps it's time to go then.
I think
Thank you
so.
so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. I think I'm still live. Am I still live? Good show, dear. LOL, hated by the love it, put it on your curriculum. Yeah, he's really nice. don't know what happened though. Like, it's just his chats were. He's gone now. I don't know whether you guys watch The Unshackled. If not, you should, because The Unshackled is. Yeah. I'm frozen, so I'm just gonna tune out. This Sunday, tune into my channel. Still have sound? I turned it off. Screen is frozen. Oh my god. I'm so unprofessional, I have no idea. Let's just listen. I'm not doing anything. Alright, hang on, let me figure this out. Streamlabs. The echo went. The echo went because he left and then he came back. Okay, I'm gonna